Hello and welcome to Crossroads. Today I have the pleasure of welcoming a very special guest, Mushegh Yekmalyan.
Exactly.
Mushegh, hello.
Thank you. Hello.
Now Mushegh is an international expert. He's currently in Armenia. He has 20 years of experience, especially in torture prevention and rehabilitation. He's involved in EU-Armenia relations and especially in the monitoring of SEPA and other agreements. We'll be talking about SEPA, an agreement between the EU and Armenia in a minute. Previously, he was senior human rights advisor at the World Organization Against Torture in Brussels. He served as a human rights officer at the OSCE in Yerevan, and he had many other high-flying jobs, also with the United Nations. Mushegh, as we just heard, did I miss something in your resume?
No,
something you would like to add? No.
Overdid it. Yes.
As we just heard, you've long lived in Brussels, but you're now in Armenia, and you're involved in various capacities in Armenia's relationship with the European Union, and that's why we wanted you to have you on Crossroads, because you have a unique perspective on what's going on between Armenia and the EU. I believe one of the things that's going on at the moment is harmonization of legislation. That's adapting Armenia's legislation to EU standards in all kinds of fields, from environment, energy, consumer protection, all sorts of things. I invited you here to help us understand what's going on, make the connection between the big picture and the small details of policy making. So I hope you'll help us understand what adapting to the EU entails for Armenia, whether Armenia is moving in the right direction and how fast, and what the prospects are for the future. Is Armenia ever going to join the EU? You don't need to answer right now, but is Armenia ever going to join the EU? If not, what are the alternatives and what are the benefits of all this work that is going on and that you're involved in, as I was saying? So let's start from the beginning and with a bigger picture. I have 3 milestones in mind. I'm sure there are other relevant things to say, but in 2017, I believe this agreement, the SEPA, the Comprehensive and Exhaustive
Enhanced Partnership.
An Enhanced Partnership Agreement was signed between the EU and Armenia. And then last year, at the beginning of the year, of course, the Parliament voted to start the accession process to the EU. And I understand this, although this is a law.
Visa that was the law. Armenian Parliament, adopted the law on accession process, but this is more of like...
I understand. This is more a symbolic step.
Yeah.
It's nevertheless a law, and it was adopted in Parliament. And then the third one is, of course, the new partnership agenda. Yes. There's also the visa liberalization. I was just
so many things around there. And as you said, each of these documents also has huge areas that they cover.
Yes. Yeah. And we won't go into all the details today, obviously.
No, of course not.
Now, but the EU, one has to admit, doesn't do a very good job of explaining what all this means. Yeah. And if you read their documentation, you find a few empty expressions like the shared vision for the coming years. That sounds very nice, but it doesn't say very much about what's actually going on the ground. Enhanced momentum. They want to deploy joint efforts to enhance all kinds of things like transport, energy, the digital links, all sorts of things. So can you explain briefly, if possible, what these documents are actually about? And what is the difference between the 2017 SEPA and the 2025 partnership agreement?
Well, thanks. Just to start with that, I work also on similar European integration related issues also in Ukraine right now in parallel. Then before that, I worked on Moldova and Georgia. In Georgia, I worked for much longer periods, especially in justice sector reform. And then when I started working in Armenia for approximation project, EU IKEA approximation and other projects, the Georgian experience and Moldovan experience came very handy because I submitted 2 research papers on the ways that these 2 countries have proceeded, including also Ukraine. But more of the focus on this 2, Georgia and Moldova, and Armenia following that path. The question about how different are this SEPA, for example, with the new partnership agenda, you can see that there are many fields that are continuously covered by both of them, but there is also a specific part on defense, on not the non-lethal military support, but just comprehensive defense support, comprehensive security support, not defense, like more of security related aspect that is included in the new partnership agenda. But SEPA, I think, is one of the most comprehensive documents. It was, as you rightly said, was signed in 2017.
Most comprehensive documents compared to these other countries you're talking about?
No, compared to the visa liberalization or the new partnership agreement, because it covers every possible field of life in Armenia, basically, starting from energy sector, human rights, tourism, local development, you name it. So everything is there. It's around, with the annexes, it's around 700 pages altogether. Right. It has like more than 370 articles itself. So, it entered into force in 2021 after all 27 member states ratified it. And the implementation started even before that, because there was a need for a lot of prep work starting from 2019, but a lot happened during 2020, COVID, the war, and then after the elections of 2021, and after it was already, it became an official document between Armenia and European Union after 27 ratifications, then it started the implementation, the main implementation phase. But you're absolutely right on when you're saying that there is not much information and not many people know. This is one of the big pro issues, but I think I can say that I see some improvement compared to 2023 or 2024. In 24, one of our partner organizations, the Gyumri Aspares Press Club, did a media monitoring for 2 months on how many times, like SEPA agreement or EU partnership or whatever is mentioned on all, including public TV. And the number for 2 months, that was like 4 times only or something.
Oh, really? Very little?
Very little, back in 24. But then with this report submitted to the EU delegation, and also a lot of work was conducted through various projects on ground, and we see more and more coverage now through public TV. But still, I think people need to understand that the role of EU, because EU is the major donor, the biggest donor for Armenian, with the direct financial support to the budget, basically. And this fact is, you know that there
How much does the EU provide in budgetary support?
I can't tell you a figure, but this direct support is in form of technical assistance plus direct support to some, for example, reforms, when the formula like more for more is working. So you implement, there is an agreement, for example, to digitalization of court system and or anti-corruption whole machinery to put in place. Once this is done, for example, there was an agreement that was signed between the Ministry of Justice and the EU delegation, and symbolically, the signature was put that we started. It was around 5 million euros that was invested.
From what I understand, so they don't fund specific projects; they give the money to the government, providing that a certain policy objectives are fulfilled.
In a way that there is an agreement. What are the milestones? What specifically this money is going to be spent on? and then they provide the money to the government, and government starts implementation. And at the end, if the evaluation of this implementation is okay, then money is transferred from European Union.
Okay, let me try and give you a big picture, and you tell me if I'm right. So, of course, there is the distant objective for Armenia of joining the EU, and also an objective for the EU of maybe letting Armenia in. In the meantime, the deal is a little bit different. SEPA and the partnership agreement provide some measure of access to the European market for Armenia, on condition that Armenia implements reforms that are necessary for that market, because market access depends on harmonization in all kinds of sectors, with the added advantage for Armenia that it needs a stronger, more effective government, updated legislation, and so on. And this provides a support. I mean, the EU, I think, is the international organization with the most experience in reforming legislation, in sort of building capacity. And so it takes advantage of that service that the EU provides. Would that be a fair summary of the deal that's on the table here?
I think what you described about access to market is most relates to the association agreements. That's what we were negotiating up until 2013, when in one night
SEPA provides some market access.
Only some, but not to the extent that was in DCFTA, or it was also that Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine received.
Yes.
Because we downgraded association agreement, so we abandoned it, basically.
For those who were still too young at the time, in 2013, Armenia refused.
Yes,
under Russian pressure, Armenia refused to sign an agreement that would have given it free access to the European market. That was already basically
at the stage of all the negotiations were finished. The Armenians were doing quite well, and they were like forerunners to sign this agreement. But then, under specific pressure from one of the northern capitals, from Moscow, Sir Sargsyan flew there, and he signed the agreement to join at that time it was the customs union, then later became Eurasian Union. Main justification was the security, that we will get security. Yes. So that's why, when I will just explain. So for a couple of years, the association agreement was completely abandoned. Nothing was happening. And then there was this, again, rapprochement between EU and Armenia starting 2015, end of 14, 15, 16, when they said, look, we have negotiated big document, which has a lot of important reform package in it. So maybe if we leave this aside, like the part of the standard association agreement, and sign something new and unique, and the SEPA agreement is a unique one with Armenia. Nobody else has. Yes, because it's kind of castrated the parts related to the direct access to market or the imports and everything.
I wouldn't like to go too much into those details. Can we get back to that big picture that I was trying to describe?
Yes.
So you're saying that SEPA provides limited access to European market, but is that still one of the... why is Armenia doing this?
It's the awareness on what the European market wants.
My point is, why is the EU
because
doing this?
Because it's in Armenia's interest to have reformed, as Prime Minister said recently.
For reform's sake.
Yes, because he put it very well. It's not always that I cite Armenian Prime Minister, but I think he formulated it quite well when he said, we do reforms with European Union, and we go the direction of joining the European Union. If they at some point say, you're not fit, you cannot join 10 years or 20 years down the road, at least we will have well-reformed system in place already. So we are modernizing Armenia through these reforms. That's the Armenia's interest, to have a more modern and reformed system in place. And if on top of that you get the membership, then that's even better. If you don't get the membership of the European Union, you at least have a well-reformed and modern and well-functioning system in place.
So trade Has nothing to do with it.
Trade is a political decision, because even if when I looked at, worked for the part related to approximation of legislation, especially transport, trade, and everything, Armenia is in a tier and has all these agreements with the Eurasian Economic Union. There are
Right.
many things, many standards that are contradictory, starting from markings on the winter tires. There are very different winter tire markings that you go to Russia, then you come back, you replace those tires, and then you go to Europe because it has another other markings
right.
and other requirements. So this is just one detail, but there are a lot of differences. So also, citing again Prime Minister, he said at some point we need to make our decision.
A choice, yes.
A choice. So sitting on two chairs can work for some certain period of time, but these two chairs going apart from each other, the longer you go the road, then at some point you need to have a decision. Do we abandon each one chair and we jump on the other one, or we stay on the Eurasian Economic?
Yeah, and
that's where your question is answered like that. So whenever Armenians make their strategic choice of abandoning Eurasian Economic Union and fully joining the, going back to the association agreement type of agreement, then there is a road to the European Union.
So is the idea that Armenia wants to get its legislation as ready for the EU and legislation,
as much
more,
as,
hang on a second, and more broadly the government as ready as possible to the EU, so that it can make that without compromising its access to the Eurasian market, so that it can make that decision as late as possible and only cut off the Eurasian market when it's almost ready to access the European market.
It seems like that, but then for the Eurasian market, Armenia is not the only player.
Right.
I mean, Russians keep repeating all the time, saying that it's incompatible. The European Union aspirations of Armenia are incompatible with staying at the Eurasian Union on many occasions, like nearly on monthly or weekly basis. They repeat this. So the cutoff point when it will be, when this decision will be made, or maybe there will be a tremendous pressure, and we have seen this in 2013 when there was a U-turn. God forbid if there is, I don't exclude also the possibility of another U-turn towards Russia, depending how the conflict will end in Ukraine. And I don't want to go into geopolitical domain here, but many things depend on this kind of developments.
Yes.
There of a brutal interference in Armenia from Russia is experienced, I don't know how things will go after that. Including overthrowing the government, installing a new government, or doing pro-Russian.
So in other words, Armenia is doing one step at a time, because it makes no sense to have a 10-year plan when you don't know what the future is made of.
I think now they learned, unfortunately, through very hard life experience, the lesson of how to navigate in this crazy and unpredictable situation in the region and the world. And for now, what we can see is that the European direction, at least verbally, is declared as the main direction where Armenia is moving. And the work is being implemented in Armenia on European integration, including like harmonization and approximation of legislation at some point. But what is functional in Armenia are the regulations of the Eurasian Union.
Right.
We are practically inside the Eurasian Union, and their legislation
and who sets those regulations?
There is a council also.
Right.
Are they formally council, but
as abundant, as demanding as the European Union's legislation?
This is a different kind of format, because this council sometimes copies and pastes some standards from Russian legislation. And then it becomes imperative for everybody. basically.
So
to
every
adopt
country
it.
has to adopt that legislation.
Every country has to adopt. There are some bits and pieces here and there that you can negotiate, like, for example, this importing the electric cars that Armenia is all the time kind of getting some concessions, but there are parts that you don't have concessions. You have to just abide the rules. That's why. Imagine as a member of European Union, a country member of European Union starts negotiations with some other regional union, which has also the same kind of powers, slowly to abandon the EU and to join there. At some point, all the members will say, okay, you need to make a decision. Are you here with us or you are there? Because apart from, there are tariffs, there are different standards.
If I may say so, that is the original sin of the EU's Eastern policy, or of Russia's Western policy, if you prefer, that because there hasn't always been a Eurasian Economic Union, and there haven't always been these association agreements with Eastern countries. It's in the early 2010s, I think 2012, 2013, that these policies were set in place, and they were explicitly made to be exclusive, so that a country had to choose between the EU and Russia. That is how we got the trouble in Ukraine and in Georgia and in Moldova. And in Armenia. Armenia chose Russia at the time, back in 2013.
Yes.
And I remember in the summer of 2013, officials in Yerevan were telling me, oh, Armenia isn't Russia's problem, Ukraine is Russia's problem. This is a year before, or 6 months before Maidan and all the rest.
And the other stuff.
And these problems could have been anticipated. Anyway, that's an aside. This is not the subject of our conversation today. I'd like to focus on the specifics of what Armenia is doing. Can you give me some examples of progress in Armenian legislation, areas where Armenia's been making good progress and legislation is close
very
to the
good
EU?
progress is done both on legislative and institutional basis on the anti-corruption field, like the institutionalization of the fight against corruption. All these anti-corruption bodies are created, state funding is provided, people are recruited, and laws are in place for this to work, and there is obvious move on in this direction. But
the corruption is shrinking, is reducing.
It needs to be evaluated because there is a big debate there. The government says where we stop with the approximation, where we adopt all the laws, we create institutions, that's it. We have done our homework. But on the other hand, the EU and standards say approximation definitely includes implementation.
Right.
And the implementation should be monitored in the long term to understand whether all that you have created has resulted in something. So we are at a stage, you said about progress, at least a little bit progress.
Right.
I can say that let's not run into
So
further
now we have
progress.
the laws,
At least
we have the
the
institutions,
institutions,
and the
we have
staff.
people, we have cars, we have staff, we have well-paid people sitting in these anti-corruption bodies, and policies, everything is adopted. Now we're waiting the harvesting part to see what the results are.
Are there some areas where we can see that there are results already on the ground?
On the ground, it's difficult to say. I think everything is in progress. Everything is in movement, like digitalization of justice sector. You know, when you are inventing, putting new things on the table, you have a lot of criticism from all sides. For example, lawyers were absolutely unhappy with this new digital e-court system because they are not used to work with these platforms. For example, the filing a case with the court is now in civil cases, it's only digital. No papers, no long descriptions. And if you look at this platform, it has a lot of drop-down menus where if you are used to this thing, it's very easy. It's very quick. But many lawyers who have practitioners for 40 years, they need to sit and write all the circumstances.
Apart from the intrinsic advantage of digitalization, why is digitalization part of the reforms? Is it part of the fight against corruption, and why?
No, there's not only. Like, for example, now we have big trouble, a big issue that was coming from Soviet times in Armenian justice sector. You don't have much of segregated data on many cases, on gender aspects, the age, or this and that. So when you digitalize something, you can have disaggregated data on many aspects,
And you can
which
assess
helps you
implementation.
in 5 years' time to see where are we going. We're going up, we're going down.
Right.
How many courts do we really need? How many courts we need in one region, in Yerevan or other places. So this all is the data, the big data that comes in through digitalization, can help you to do more targeted reform. Not just guessing or doing small kind of surveys and base your thing on that.
More broadly, so is there progress in the justice sector? That's a very sensitive area.
I will
right?
not say, I can't say that there is a significant progress in justice sector, and I will tell you
Can you
statistically.
say that there is not sufficient
I think
progress?
we are doing quite bad in terms of criminal justice reform, because Armenia is unfortunately in one of the leading positions in the number of inmates who are in preliminary detention. So detention as a measure of preventive detention is used more extensively than in many of the countries in the world. So there is this annual survey that is published every year. Many around 120 countries chip in and provide data. It's called World Prison Report. And this World Prison Report presents I remember I was part of that also when I worked for PRI. I was providing and I was editing also these reports. So we always had 10 to 11 million prisoners in the world, the total number. And the average is 30%, like 3 million out of this 10 or 11 are always the people who are on preliminary detention. In Armenia, this now recently gets to 57-60%, goes down to 50-52, and then goes back again. This is like fluctuating quite high.
Half of the prison population has not yet been sentenced.
More of the half of the prison population has not been sentenced yet.
That's enormous.
And if you look through countries, basically it's only in Southeast Asia when we are where we can place ourselves, like in Bhutan, in Bangladesh or other countries because even in African countries we have lower numbers. In Western Europe we have much lower numbers because there are alternatives, and we also have alternatives.
The reference is 3%. The reference figure, the average global figure.
30%. 30%.
Okay. Yeah.
So 30%. The last figures we had was 57. Last week, I think Minister of Justice, in a very happy manner, she declared that now we have 50%, 50-50. So
If we go in detail in each sector, we don't have enough time. What I would like you to do is give us an idea of 3 sectors where things are going well, according to the people who are monitoring these things, and 3 sectors where things are not going so well. So broad policy areas.
3 sectors where things are going well. I think we everywhere have I can't say that we have any sector we are doing excellent.
All right.
Or we are doing very good. I don't know. Those sectors.
So start with the bad sectors. Start with the bad pupils.
I was saying about the justice sector, and I think one thing is important, and that I think European Union should also pay big attention on when they do the justice sector reform related projects, that the prosecutor's office is untouched from Soviet times in Armenia. It was not reformed. It has this very predominant position vis-a-vis the courts, vis-a-vis everything else. So when you want to tackle the justice sector, you concentrate only on the courts or on the Ministry of Justice and prisons, and when you leave aside fundamental, very brutal reform of prosecutor's office, you will not go anywhere. I worked with the Armenian Ministry of Justice as expert since 2003, as OSCE and then as PRI and many, many different organizations. I've worked in 11 different international organizations, and all the time, even if there were in this projects that Armenia was not there, I managed to push Armenia into these things. And every time we come across to the same issues and same problems.
Right.
You can pick up the Council of Europe's reports,
So give me a second sector where things are not going well.
Well, I think but those sectors that are very tightly linked with the Eurasian Economic Union, where they have less margin of moving towards other directions like transport, some part of the energy, although energy is becoming more and more liberalized now. And then if Armenia manages to join all these Black Sea cable projects that EU has with Georgia, and then also if Armenia joins this kind of regional projects, then we will have better situation in the energy sector.
What about the financial sector?
I'm not an expert on financial sector.
But I think Armenia has quite a competitive financial sector.
I think it's if you look at the assessment of the IMF and World Bank, they differ a little bit from what you are saying.
Really?
In your opinion. Yeah, there is a good financial sector. We have good commercial banks, but the ratio of commercial banks and the capitalization and the money that is collected in that sector vis-a-vis the real sector is tremendous. So the real sector, meaning the agriculture or the industry, is far in worse condition than like the banking sector. Because the banking sector is mostly boosting its capital through the real estate market, construction and mortgages and this and that. So that's how like purely financial movements are bringing these big revenues to the banks. But the real sector is lagging behind. Although one thing is good that for a long time since independence, like the agriculture, all this money that was invested into the agriculture sector was always going through commercial banks with the very high rates, and very often the farmers or people living in villages were not able to borrow this money.
Yes.
But now government has changed some of these policies, and they get either zero kind of interest rates or very low interest rate money for the agriculture sector, which is very good. Another good thing that is very obvious when you travel throughout Armenia is the road construction, like part of transportation. Like all these roads that are constructed around the country are of very good and high standard, and there are even places and villages where they never had like the hard surface tarmacs.
And that's part of the reforms? That's part of the
that's part of the prioritization of rural development thing. Although, I mean, when I said...
yes, but what's it got to do with the EU?
With the EU, because...
Is it EU money?
You have... No, I don't know, maybe partly because... But you have EU, a big project called Resilience Unique, for example.
Yes.
And to have Resilience Unique, you need to have good roads towards Unique. Also, we have around 12 articles in SEPA that relate to the local development, local governance development, local tourism development, local entrepreneurship. And when you have the good communication and roads throughout the country, this supplements this local development, although there are a lot of issues in local development as well. But this is a discussion of another 2 hours.
Yes. So look, we've got.
I cannot really say really 3 good fields, 3 bad fields.
Yes. So the impression I get from what you say, we've covered a number of areas. You talked about transport. You talked about the financial sector, energy, all sorts of things. I get the impression the result is wishy-washy. Is half and half.
Yes.
Sometimes very disappointed. You talked about the justice sector and the prosecutor's office that still hasn't been reformed. But I understand there's a deadline. 2020, SEPA had to be implemented by 2027. That means Armenia wasn't expected to be entirely in conformity with the legislation by 2027. But there's a whole long list in the treaty. Will Armenia be ready?
I think Armenia will definitely go for asking for extension of that, any deadline that is in SEPA. Extension, I don't know, for 2 years or 3 years. But I don't think that everything will be like tip-top, clearly finished and done by end of next year, which is 27.
Right. Then there's an entirely different question. It's visa liberalization. Yes. So the idea of visa liberalization is that citizens of Armenia, residents of Armenia, then have access they can travel to the
Visa-free
EU.
access to EU.
Yeah, they have visa. That doesn't mean they can go and live
No.
in the EU. It means they can travel for 3 months in the EU. Then they have to go back home, but there's no control. I mean, there's no. They don't need to demand to ask for a visa as anybody coming from Armenia or many other countries to the EU. No, it can be very difficult to get into the EU. Sometimes you have a conference or you have a work appointment that you miss because the relevant embassy isn't there. And now we have a Belgian embassy in Armenia, but until
with no consulate.
But it's that's true. You still can't get a visa in Armenia.
You can't get a visa.
So it's particularly important in daily life for anybody that has dealings with the EU. So is that part of SEPA? Is that part of the
no.
That's a completely
That's
separate
a completely
process.
separate process. So that's why it took very long to negotiate it. And the start date of VLAP, this Visa Liberalization Action Plan, was only signed recently, basically. And about when we will get the results, I can bring examples like Georgians are championing. They got results like liberal visa travel, non-visa travel to EU after 5 years of signing the VLAP. Ukrainians went 9 years, I think same Moldovans. So it's a long process.
Armenia now has its
Armenia
plan.
has a visa liberalization action plan.
Yes, that's right.
When the action plan will become completed, and when the 27 EU members will say, okay, we are done with this action plan, now you can take your passports and fly to Strasbourg. That took for Georgians 5 years.
And why does all this take so long?
Because there are many preconditions. There are many things like, for example, one of the major milestones that they want Armenians to adopt a law on anti-discrimination, which will include LGBTI community-related provisions, which Armenians were not.
For people like me, you need to explain what anti-discrimination has to do with visas.
Because then it goes into rounds of, if you look at the asylum seeker applications in the European Union, in Netherlands, for example, many Armenian LGBT community members travel there claiming that they don't have protection inside the country. There is no law that protects them. That's why they cannot seek justice, and that's why they have to take asylum in European Union. So
what other sort of things does Armenia have to
there are
do?
many other things like this. The readmission agreements that is its ongoing process. It started before the VLAP was signed. Readmission when many Armenian asylum seekers who are in processing camps or in special institutions in Denmark, in Netherlands, in Belgium, in other countries, whose perspectives are not good, that they will never get asylum. They are just extending deadlines. And since Armenia is recognized and considered as a safe country, then these people, with the readmission agreements between Armenia and the members of the European Union, these people are sent back to Armenia. And this is also part of this deal. Then the border control related issues that, not surprisingly, like Armenians now took over the Zvartnots airport passport control and unlinking the system from the Russian system, so that people who travel from EU and other countries, they don't necessarily go through the databases that are shared with the Russians or completely managed by Armenians. So there are many
Is that
aspects.
a problem for Russia? Is that going to... Is that part of the Eurasian
No, it
Union?
was there before, actually, even before. Since independence, somehow there was an agreement between Armenia and Russia that the border control will be implemented by Russian FSB forces. And they were even in these passport control booths up until last year. And only last year they were replaced by, or 24 probably, replaced by Armenian. So these are all smaller steps to the visa liberal. But there are many things in this visa liberalization action plan. Market liberalization, I said about the anti-discrimination law, many other things that needs to be implemented before the visa-free access will be granted.
So from what you're saying, it all sounds like very long-term stuff. We're not going to see the results of any of this in the short term. Why should
What is
the
short
average-
term?
Well, 2
As I
years
said-
but by the elections, or within a mandate of one government.
I don't think there was any precedent that shorter than 5 years, basically. Yeah. So Georgians are champions, as I said, 5 years. In the case of Ukraine, it took 9 years.
Yeah. So Ukraine has visa facilitation. So
It's visa-free access.
looking at the overall picture, not just visa facilitation, but the general picture of the implementation of European style
Of
reforms.
the agreements, basically.
How would you compare Armenia to other countries in the same situation? That is to say, Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, of course, and also Turkey. Because Turkey has been on the road to accession
40 years. 42 years, I think.
No, actually,
No, more than that.
No,
Yeah.
2000.
No,
They started negotiation in 2000 something, so about 25 years.
I think.
Never mind.
Anyway, but they have this the economic agreement with the EU starting early 70s, and then as an applicant state, they were always there since 80s or early 90s. Anyways, so I can't compare with Turkey because I haven't worked on Turkey. I worked on Turkey only on human rights related matters and eastern part, but with quite thorough work in Moldova, Ukraine, and especially in Georgia. So unfortunately, Georgians are doing this U-turn and postponing everything that relates.
So are they backtracking?
Yes,
on the EU legislation?
backtracking. They are not They are adopting new laws that are clearly in contradiction with the EU standards and human rights standards.
So is Armenia now better placed than Georgia from the point of view of
with the
European
aspiration?
legislation?
One thing I can say that Georgians, when all this was not happening, like March 24, when it was still having these European aspirations and moving towards those aspirations, Georgians had one of the most effective state mechanisms, state institutions in place. So their Ministry of Justice, their prosecutors, their justice system was functioning very well, much better than Armenian one.
How would you compare to Moldova and Ukraine?
Moldova and Ukraine, despite the war,
Briefly,
I think Ukrainian system is quite well. The corruption in Ukraine was ongoing all the time. But Ukrainian state institutions and reform of state institutions in the context of association agreement is very impressive. It's very impressive. The way the policy level work, then the practical implementation level work is very impressive.
Okay, so Ukraine is doing very well.
It's doing well. It has its bigger problem. Ukraine has very different kind of problems. So that's why, like the war impacts many other aspects. But in case of Armenia, I think we are still in the stage that, when the sportsman wants to jump, prepares itself for a jump, but never jumps. So we are still in that
Is
stage
that Armenia?
Yeah.
So how do you explain this? If even Ukraine in the middle of a war can implement better reforms than Armenia,
I think we have maybe. I mean, this is a big explanation. I think what I observe, what I see, is that Armenians always look for shortcuts. Always look to bypass difficult things through shortcuts. For example, the approximation itself is a very lengthy and heavy process. You need to create good institutional basis, a group of good experts who will do all this law reviews and this and that. We keep talking about this for 5 years, but we haven't established that in Armenia yet. Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine have established it. And even the Moldovans moved it from Ministry of Justice to the State Chancellery and gave it more powers. So they made the system work. In case of Armenia, we have a lot of talk, a lot of conversations. Then at some point we have a lot of reports that we have approximated this and that and that. We have done this work, but we don't have institutional basis on that. No one can check was it done correctly, was it done not. Like I bring not an example but an analogy. Let's say someone is asking you to build a Volkswagen, a car.
Yes.
You will ask, okay, I need a factory, and they said, no, you can do it for yourself without a factory. And then you go in your garage, you get parts from here and there, you get the logo of Volkswagen, you put it on this, you drive it out, and then you put next to another Volkswagen. Is it a Volkswagen really or not? Because in every step. You don't have quality control. You don't have this. You don't have that. You
Yes.
have brilliant experts who can make Volkswagen in the garage, but it was not a Volkswagen. The same comes for Armenian case of approximation of the legislation. Because when I talked to the several ministries, they said, well, we looked at the European regulations and we did something similar. I mean, it doesn't work like that. It's not something similar. You have tools of comparison, which is called compliance concordance table and this and that. So these are like specifically thought through legal tools that lawyers get trained on how to use, and they see it and they measure it, and it's very concrete. It's not abstract. But what we see, it's very abstract things that they say, oh, we looked at that. But what about those regulations that are changed now? Especially in the environmental field,
Yes.
it's such a quick pace. EU adopts one piece of environmental legislation that it changes. One regulation dies and another regulation or directives come instead of the regulation. So, and because Armenia has signed a dynamic approximation,
since you
they need to follow this.
Since you brought up the question of environmental legislation, how is Armenia doing on the environmental front?
I wish our expert would be here. He would explain it better. I'm not an environmental expert, but I think in terms of
we've got the biodiversity conference of the park, the COP, next year. So environment is going to be a big thing next year, or this year rather.
Environment is a big issue, honestly speaking, because this environmental impact assessment, for example, which is a key and the main thing, it still remains as it was in Soviet times. So according to our expert who did the research, it is published on our website, and this environmental, all the changes, everything that is happening, there are key aspects where also in the justice sector, in every field, where you see systemic resistance, basically, because there are some interests below that systemic resistance. That's what I see in many fields, where if you have corrupt money circulation in prison, then you always have certain resistance to certain scrutiny or certain policy implementation, because it cuts the supply of that money that is corrupt money that is in circulation. And this is like a brutal example, but because in prisons now you don't have cash money in circulation, it went out into the banks, and that's what all the observers are saying. Like people inside the prison, they play cards, but they don't have money, so they text or they inform someone to put so much money from one card to another.
That doesn't mean the corruption has disappeared.
It's just became digital and it became into the banking system.
Right. Mushegh, we have to wrap up because we're out of time. I'd like to thank you very much. I like, if there's one image we keep in mind, we think of that that homemade Volkswagen of yours. It's been a bit of a depressing picture you offered us, and because we'd like Armenia to be a champion of reforms. Armenia is connected to the four corners of the world through its diaspora in particular, has access to all the expertise that is necessary. So I can't really find us an excuse. I hope this interview and other discussions around the subject will help provide an impetus towards more effective reforms.
I want to finish it with a bit of a positive
Please
note,
do.
Because I think what I said, we are in the jumping position. I am looking forward to that jump. I think it's a process. Every country passes this process in a certain way. I very much hope that Armenia will progress very quickly, very soon, because we have, as you said, all the preconditions for a good progress. And I very much hope that coming 2 years are going to be really big years of big change in the country in terms of institutional reform or reforms in general.
Well, I hope so too. Mushegh, thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thanks a lot. The pleasure was all mine.